All right, so this video we're going to just revisit dialogue punctuation because that was something that I wanted to make sure we were super solid on when it comes to where to indent and quotation marks and all that sort of stuff. So we're starting here from the rubric to kind of give us a reason and explanation for why we're doing this. So if you scroll down, there is a convention section. Part of that has to do with spelling and grammar and all that stuff, which there's a separate video on. But part of that also has to do with punctuating dialogue correctly, and that includes indenting in the places where it needs to be indented, and kind of how those dialogue tags, like the he said or the my mom exclaimed, how they kind of function with the thing that's being said. So let's look at an example. We can kind of talk through how all of that would work. So this is that story we looked at about the fishing, going fishing with Grandpa. And it starts with a section of dialogue. So remember, just to review, this is the dialogue. How are you feeling is the dialogue. My mom asked is the dialogue tag. So those two things have to go together in order to make sure that our reader knows who's speaking and what they're saying. So how are you feeling, my mom asked, that's dialogue by itself. So that needs to be indented. Right now it's not indented, so I'm going to press tab and it'll indent it just like that. And so that's my first line. I'm using dialogue for my lead. So it says, how are you feeling, my mom asked. I could see her eyes looking at me in the rearview mirror from where she sat in the driver's seat. So that's some more description, but that description is still about mom. So that's going to probably stay as part of that same paragraph because it's all about mom. I looked up from my phone. Now, if you've watched the screencast about narrative paragraphing, you know that when there's a shift in character that we're focusing on, we often start a new paragraph. So I'm going to press enter to start that new paragraph and to signify to my reader, okay, now we're switching from mom to somebody else, in this case, the narrator. So I looked up from my phone. That's the description. Okay, I guess, I said. Okay, that's a new speaker. So I'm going to start that new paragraph there. Okay, I guess I said. Dialogue tag stays with the dialogue. Okay, well, I know your grandpa is so excited to spend the weekend with you, she said. That's, again, I'm switching speakers, so I'm going to press enter. Now notice, too, in the dialogue, I've got the things that are said are surrounded by quotes, and then there's always another punctuation mark, whether it's a comma in this case, or up here, it's a quote, or it's a question mark, to separate out the thing that's being said from the dialogue tag. So there's always that extra piece of punctuation besides the quotation marks that separates the said from the unsaid. So okay, I guess, comma, I said, with the okay, I guess, in quotation marks. Okay, well, I know your grandpa is excited to spend the weekend with you. We got that comma to separate out the quote from the unquote, she said. I think you're going to like spending time together, just the two of you. Now, that's still mom speaking, so I do not need to indent here. If I indented here, then what I would be telling my reader is somebody else is talking now. It's not still mom. But because it's still mom, I'm going to backspace it and make sure that I'm communicating to my reader this is still the same person talking. Okay, after some thought, I replied, yeah. So we have a new speaker. Now, this is where I noticed a couple of people might have maybe missed a punctuation thing or an indentation thing. So where we want to start that new line is here, right? After some thought, I replied, yeah. What we don't want to do, and this is what I saw a couple of people doing, is they said, okay, well, there's a new speaker, and that new speaker starts here. So I'm going to press enter and start it right there, right? So after some thought, I replied, yeah. That's not how it works, right? The dialogue tag, so the I replied, always sticks with the dialogue. They're never on separate lines like that. So because the dialogue tag comes first with some description, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of that sentence, and I'm going to press enter and tab to start the new line there, right? So after some thought, I replied, yeah. That was all I wanted to say. So I'm continuing with description. That description is also all about me, or the narrator, the character who's speaking, the first person I narrator. So that description can stay with the dialogue that's being spoken by the narrator. Blah, 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 blah. I continue on, right? So as I'm punctuating dialogue, I want to be really careful that I'm indenting every time there's a new speaker. that I have that extra punctuation mark, whether it's a question mark or a comma or an exclamation mark, or like in this case, there's a period there at the end because that's the end of the sentence. But I also have the comma there to separate the dialogue tag from the dialogue, right? So there's always going to be some sort of punctuation mark besides the quotation marks that separates the spoken part from the unspoken part, whether it's a question or a comma or whatever. Okay, so double check your dialogue punctuation. Make sure that you're indenting in the right places, that you're starting those new lines and signifying the right message to your reader about who's speaking and when the speaker changes.